And good evening, everyone. Welcome to another round of sound. This is the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. I'm Bob Pompeani. Thanks for staying up. We are live tonight. We have a lot to get into, including what happened today in the AFC and NFC championship games, as well as the Super Bowl in 2 weeks. Steeler topics as well. They have a new quarterback coach. We'll get into all of that. We also will talk about the Astros and the cheating scandal. But the #1 topic tonight on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown will be the Penguins, as they continue to play extremely well despite many obstacles. And here is your panel, left to right on your television screen here. We will be talking with Jeff Hathhorn, outstanding sports director at 93.7 The Fan, over there to the left. In the middle is Josh Yohe, the terrific beat writer for The Athletic on the Penguins, and growing that beard pretty good. I wish I could grow one like that. And to his left, or right, or whichever where you are in that box over there, it's Mark Kaboly, who does a great job with The Athletic, covering the Steelers as well. So The Athletic is well represented here tonight. We're going to get into hockey. Josh, I want to start with you on this one. Matt Murray came in today, played extremely well after he gave up the first 3 goals, one of which was put into his own net by Jack Johnson. Accidents do happen in hockey. But he got booed after that moment. And I'm just curious because Matt Murray has delivered a lot of good stuff here in Pittsburgh. He's still a young man, 24 years old, right? They got 2 good goalies, and yet the fans turned on him. How big of a story is this?
Yeah, they did. He received a few Bronx cheers today, which I have never heard at a home Penguins game for any Penguins goaltender in the decade plus that I've covered the team. I don't think Matt was real happy about it. He was asked about it and gave a very terse no comment. I can assure you that a number of his teammates were not very happy about it. That's about as irritated as I've heard the Penguins with their own crowd after a game with the way Murray was treated. It was strange. I know he's not having a great season. I know Jari has been better. But you know what? Like you said, Bob, the guy's won 2 Stanley Cups. And oh, by the way, he's won 5 straight starts. So it's not like he hasn't been pretty good in the last couple of weeks. I felt bad for him, to be quite honest with you, and it was just a little bit puzzling, even though it was a bad start for the Penguins. You just don't hear that reaction in that building. And Penguins fans, it's a great base, but my God, is it a spoiled base, too. And I thought that was a little evident today.
And I think, Josh, it's spoiled. I mean, who would imagine booing somebody who's won 2 championships very recently? And this is a guy, as you said, he's won 5 straight starts. Yeah, he's had times where he's been bad, and pretty bad. And it's a good thing to have Tristan Jari, but to boo a guy like that, who's meant so much and always handled himself very well, it's not like he's a guy that embarrasses the organization or to have any issue with the fan base at all. Yeah, you got to realize just how good you have it. Sometimes you got to step back and think about booing a guy like Matt Murray.
I believe they booed Tom Brady in New England a couple weeks ago, and nobody's had more success than them. I think we tend to overreact just a little bit to this. It reminds me of the Twitter, the vocal minority. How many people really in that arena really were booing him? It might have sounded like it was a lot. I don't think that's a cross-section of the entire Penguin fan base. The people that did do it should be, you know, they should be not be very happy with themselves that they were able to go down that road and be able to boo a guy like that. But for no matter at all do I believe that that's the feeling of the entire team. You know how that is, especially now you even have a 12 o'clock game. I don't even know how many people there were just, you know, true, legit Penguin fans or have a chance to go to a Sunday afternoon game. So I'm not going to read a ton into it.
Well, it's also a product of social media, I think, too. People get into that quick reaction, right? Josh, you see it every day.
Oh, it is. Twitter. You can't read Twitter too often. We all do it. It is the vocal minority oftentimes. And you're right, Mark. Most of the building wasn't booing him. But I will say it was enough people that everyone on the team noticed. And it's not really very common to hear them talk about the crowd reaction after a game. And in Matt Murray's defense, he has not had a good season. But I can tell you, just from being at practice most days at morning skates, he is working his tail off. He knows he hasn't had a great season. He's doing everything he can to get back to the level in which we're accustomed to seeing, and maybe he'll get there. I think he might.
And to Josh's point, too, I think it's important to note that, you know, he could have put out some feelers or been moping around, and he hasn't done that. Is he available to the media a lot? No. Of course, we always want guys to be available all the time. But he's not moping. He's not dragging anybody down, and he's not, you know, saying, oh, you're going to need me or anything like that. He's handled it very well, especially for a 25-year-old.
He is, and he's done that. And quite frankly, you very rarely see Sidney Crosby critical of fans, but he was today, which is a telling sign. On the topic of goaltending, so Jeff, let's look into the future a little bit because you know, every time you talk to Mike Sullivan, he says, we have two outstanding goaltenders, and he does. Tristan Jarry's playing at a very high level, although not as much recently. Matt Murray, you know what he can do. How do they handle this goaltending moving forward? What's the most ideal situation, Jeff, to you?
I'm not going to overthink it. Who's hot in April? That's who I put in net to start the postseason. I think it's a simple formula. I think you can overcomplicate it. You can think about playoff starts, and yeah, those are important. And Murray has a lot more experience. But did Murray have a lot of experience when he supplanted Fleury? I don't think. I think you ride whoever the hot goalie is, and if that guy falters in the postseason, you can make a switch then.
It is a fascinating thing because, listen, Tristan Jarry is going to be in the All-Star game in St. Louis next weekend, and it's not by accident. He has probably been the best goalie in hockey for the past 2 months. So if he's going to keep playing at that level, and you're right, he's tailed off a little bit, but he hasn't been bad, and they're going to give him more starts for sure. However, there is a history here when there are two goaltenders, and the Penguins organization maybe isn't sure which one to go with. We know who Mike Sullivan, in the end, always has gone to in the past. I still have the sense that if Matt Murray is playing well come April, there's a good chance he's the guy, but it has become a very interesting situation because you cannot deny that Jarry has been the better goaltender. The only issue, Bob, he's never done it before in the playoffs,
Right.
and as we know, that's a completely different world. Some goalies can do it, some can't.
And that's exactly what I'm worried about. If there's one thing that, I mean, this team's been unbelievable the past couple of months. And one thing I would worry about heading into April, if they do go with that hot guy, you know darn well the other guy's looking over his shoulder or the starter's looking over his shoulder in the playoffs. If I have one bad game, one bad period, somebody else is coming in and I might lose my job, then vice versa. And that could create a bad scene in the playoffs. I think that's Mike Sullivan has to be very, very careful with that. If he commits to a guy in April, late April, into the playoffs, I think he has to have full faith in that guy going forward. Because, I mean, in history throughout the NHL, I mean, you guys would know better than me, how many times have it actually happened that two goalies were switched back and forth? Probably not very much rather than injury. So they're going to have to pick somebody and stick with him.
It's rare, but it happened in 2017 when Marc-Andre Fleury had one bad game in Ottawa, and that is all it took. A lot of us still thought he would go with Fleury the rest of the way. Nope, he was waiting to get Matt Murray in the net. Don't know if that'll be the case this spring, but I'd still rather have two good goalies as opposed to zero good goalies.
Yeah.
And if Murray keeps trending in this direction, they've got two good goaltenders. That's not a bad thing.
I agree, and I think, you know, people talk about trades. That shouldn't happen now. They need what they need. They're trying to win now, and that's your biggest area of importance, I think, when it comes to playoffs. All right, I want to ask you guys real quick. We have about 2 minutes left. We saw this week that Alexander Ovechkin moved ahead of Mario Lemieux in the all-time goal scoring. Congrats to him. I want to ask this question. Who is a better goal scorer, Lemieux or Ovechkin? Because I think current day, nobody's rivaling Ovechkin. But to me, Jeff, I'll start with you. To me, Mario Lemieux is the best hockey player I've ever seen, period. So Ovechkin doesn't do what Mario Lemieux does as a complete player. Now, he's a great player. Yes, he's the best goal scorer of this day. Who's better if you had to pick a choice here between those two?
Well, I think Lemieux is a better overall goal scorer. He can do it many different ways. Not that Ovechkin can't, but come on, no one has had a better slap shot ever in the history of the game than Alexander Ovechkin. But I would also say Lemieux is a better scorer because he can do it so many different ways, and he can also assist a lot better than what Alexander Ovechkin can
By far, yes.
I think Ovechkin is going to break Wayne Gretzky's record, which I believe is 894 goals. He never gets hurt. He's just going to stand in the circle. He's the most predictable star ever.
How does that work so much, though? I know the shot's great, Josh, but everybody knows he's going to stand over there, and yet he continues to get in space.
The rest of their power play is great, too, so you can't focus on him too much. I think that's the issue. You know what he's going to do. I think he can be 40 and still keep scoring 35 goals a year. I really believe that. But to answer your question, yeah, I agree with Jeff. Mario is the best player I've ever seen. He's the most diverse goal scorer ever. It's very difficult to compare eras, but there is no doubt Ovechkin is by far the best goal scorer of his era.
I would like to see Ovechkin play during the Lemieux era, actually, the clutching and grabbing, the early 90s type of hockey, and see if he could have the same numbers as Lemieux. Something tells me they don't. And on the flip side of that, I'd like to see Ovechkin play back during, even before that, when Gretzky would have 210 points or whatever it is, and see how well he could play in that era. But I think it's very hard to compare eras and compare players like this, although if you're asking me who's better all-around player is, there's no doubt it's Mario.
Yep. But Ovechkin does bring a physical dynamic to the game as well. It's interesting to watch him play, and who knows, a lot of games coming up with the Capitals and the Penguins here in the next couple of months. We have football coming up, but right now I want to tell you that it's always exciting when a new team moves into a new building, and that's certainly true with the team at number 1 Cochran Hyundai South Hills and their spacious new facility, even though they only moved less than a mile up the street. Right now, for a limited time, you can get special grand opening offers in both sales and service. The new number 1 Cochran Hyundai South Hills, newly conveniently located, too, for you at 3220 West Liberty Avenue. Check them out, also Cochran.com. We'll be right back. The number 1 Cochran Sports Showdown is brought to you by number 1 Cochran, Go One Better, and by Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield. Have a greater hand in your health.